thinking about my friend Drew Jackson, who says contemplative prayer is a practice for dying, a practice for death.
Good times.
Right? I know, it doesn't sound very attractive to most people, but it means the world to me because this is what I've lived. And the invitation of Jesus is an invitation to die. We know that. But what needs to die and what needs to live? This is the question, I think, for all of us. And so contemplative practice really teaches us how to die. I know it doesn't sound very inviting, and yet we know that we want to live in a more resurrected way. But to get to the resurrection, we have to die, and we have to learn how to die well. And so every time I set aside a moment for a contemplative practice, I'm dying to my desire to be in control. I'm dying to my desire to be involved in this activity or this relationship. For those moments, I'm practicing a kind of death, a death to my own will, to surrender and yield to a will that's higher than me, or a will that is rooted in my true self, my highest self. And that's absolutely critical to living a life that is more free, a life that is connected to the divine and flowing in such a way that we are able to be more present and more connected to the resources of love, forgiveness, mercy, compassion. And so contemplative practice is fundamentally connected to the invitation to die. And so to die to our own will in a practice then translates over time in our daily life when things aren't going our way. And we have a greater capacity then to let go of our own will and accept the circumstances of our life. Now, that's not to settle, but that is to posture ourselves in such a way that we are more receptive and present, and really when we can be more accepting of our circumstances, regardless of how painful they are. That alleviates some of our suffering, because the suffering really comes in our resistance to what is. And so contemplative practice teaches us to die to our will, our overactive will, accept life as it is, and then in that process, there's a resurrection of sorts that comes. That then, in the midst of the difficulties, once we're at a place of acceptance, then there can be this access to a freer way to respond then. Not from a place of resisting what is and wanting to control it, but being able to face what is, however challenging and painful, and respond from our highest, truest self, from a response that is more aligned really with the will of God. Surrender is really saying yes to what is, and finding a deeper yes that is a truer yes in terms of the highest, best response I can give to what is. Even though retreating seems counterintuitive, it's in the retreating that we uncover life. Because in our posture that's always like moving, or resisting, it's in the retreat, in the surrender, in the letting go, in the dying, that we actually open to the new life that is more capable of responding to all of this out here that we've been efforting and resisting. And when we can learn this incredible grace that really all the natural world just naturally gives itself to, this posture of letting go into what is, of not resisting, of not efforting more than is necessary to flow with the current of life. And this is what is possible for us when we can learn from really the plants and the animals and the insects and all the living creatures, this way of just letting go into what is and learning how to flow with the natural current of life. In my life, there's been these experiences of really profound suffering for me. Things not going my way, wanting life to be different than it is, wanting relationships to be different than they are. And as I have learned to give myself to contemplative practice over time, there's been this a real freedom to let go. And in the letting go, there's been a dying of my own agenda, of my own will that is out of alignment with the divine. And so what that has meant is that, and it's difficult because two natures are sometimes activating at once. And then the part of me that thinks I know best and thinks I've got it figured out and thinks I know how things should be is at war with this part of me that knows that there is something I can't see here, and there's something I don't know. And if I can let go and die, I can open to this greater truth, this greater reality, this greater existence that is at service of, and in the service of all of us, like has my best interest at heart and has the best interest of others at heart. But in my limited, small, false version of Felina, I don't have those eyes to see that. I'm too consumed with my own self, and it's too much of a self-centered kind of perception. But when I can let go of that and die to that, I open up into a greater perception, a wider, a broader view that then actually frees me to live into my best self, my higher self. I mean, just like a very practical example of this in some way is like the part of me that really grew up wanting to hide, who kind of knew her place and grew comfortable kind of taking her place in the back seat, not wanting to be in front, speak my truth, but felt safer if I was just kind of behind the scenes. And as I started to awaken to that part of me and was invited to die to a lot of that, because all of that was consumed with myself. Well, if I put myself out there, or if I disagree with this person, then they might not approve, and I might not get the affection that I want, and I might not get the felt love that I want, and that's scary. And so as I began to die to that, the invitation was to speak my truth, stand up straight, speak truth, be honest in relationships, put myself out there in the way that I knew I was made to in certain ways, professionally and vocationally and relationally. And that's incredible because there's so much life and energy and creativity in that, and I'm flowing in like the truth of who I am. That's the resurrected life in me. And so why die to live? Because this other way I'm living pales in comparison to the new life that's possible as I learn to let go and trust. It really requires that we're aware of our fundamental need, and it's more about responding from true self than false self. It's less about ego and self-centeredness, and it's more about these decisions are critical to be of greatest service in the world. You know, but it's even that, it's like, well, to be of great service, doesn't that mean like I need to be out there doing? I mean, I live that life, you know, social justice activism and going and just trying to do my best to be selfless for others. But that actually wasn't selfless. That was actually rooted in an ego that was self-centered and wanted to be loved. So it's just like, that's where it's like the veils have to come off, and we have to see what's really operating here. You know, is it the false self or the true self? And how do we tend to the true self and do what the true self needs? So at times, true self needs self-care, and which can be withdrawal and what might look like as like self-denial to a fault. But if true self needs that, that's going to help true self live into the truest version of herself so that she can then go out and engage in the world from a higher place vibrationally and really in touch with the divine that's moving in her and through her, and she's more out of the way. Her false self is more out of the way. But sometimes what true self needs is to get out from hiding, get out of the contemplative prayer closet and get out in the world and speak truth to power. And so it's just critical that we're really giving ourselves to contemplative practices that help us discern what does true self need and do that. Because what true self needs is not only for herself or himself, but it's for everyone else. And that's the nature of humanity. I mean, it's all mixed up. We're operating out of both sides of the face a lot of the time, right? But over time, I know it to be true. With contemplative practice, we can operate more and more out of that place of freedom, out of true self. So it's complicated, but I found contemplative practice to really help me get more aligned and to know when I need to withdraw. I mean, this is what Jesus modeled for us, right? Like, Jesus knew when he needed to withdraw and go into a solitary place and when to be available to the crowds. It's just a dance with the divine. And there's this scripture from the First Testament that is about, when you move to the right or to the left, you'll hear a voice saying, "This is the way, walk in it." I think it's that simple, We just have to wake up to the voice, to that inner voice of love that's guiding us all the time, so that if we move to the left or to the right, we hear that voice saying, "This is the way, that's not the way. This is the person to stop for, this isn't the person. This is the creative project to give yourself to, not this one."